This video looks a little bit different to what you're used to in a Wex photo video review of a product. It's because we're testing out Sony's new RX0 action camera.
So we're here at Mudmania, down south, do this off-road buggy in. I'm going to show Matt how to drive, but first, let's roll on to the specs. Well, that was a bit dramatic, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a little bit.
Anyway, we brought the RX0 along on a shoot to give us a slightly different perspective whilst we created a short promo video for Mudmania.
And the reason that we decided to bring the RX0 is that it's extremely durable. It's waterproof to 10 meters, shockproof to 2 meters, and crushproof to 200 kilograms.
And I mean, it even survived being flung off one of our buggies whilst we were racing around, and it was perfectly fine.
Definitely. And despite its tiny size, the Sony RX0 has a stacked 1-inch Exmor RS CMOS sensor at its core, and this 15.3 megapixel chip is the same physical size as that found in the company's RX10 Mark IV and RX100 cameras.
A sensor of that size in a body that's so compact,
yeah,
pretty incredible.
It's a premium compact sensor in that thing.
Okay, I mean, so 1-inch sensor in a body this small, what can we expect?
Well, I think users can really expect to see some improvements to things like dynamic range and, higher ISO performance. It's got a 125 to 12,800 ISO range, and really across a lot of that range, you're going to get some really great image quality both for stills and video.
Now, what about that fixed lens that's in front of it?
Yeah, so it's got a fixed lens and it's a 24mm full frame equivalent optic with an f4 aperture, and this provides a really wide angle of view for capturing those immersive action shots, well suited for first person perspectives. It's not the classic fisheye look that you may see on things like a GoPro, but it's still pretty wide.
Yeah, sometimes with the GoPro it can just be too wide and it ruins the shot. It's distracting, and when you get into post you want to try and correct it, where at 24mm we're at a pretty decent focal length. And when we were shooting with it, I realised that you can actually manually focus this lens as well, which is quite unusual for a camera of this size. Fortunately, there is a focus assist that magnifies the area that you're trying to focus on, and you couple that with peaking, and it is a workable solution, although you do have to use the buttons on the back to shift the focus.
And I think you've talked about another key feature of this device there. It's got a 1.5-inch rear display, and not all action cameras have got a rear display. This one, at least you can compose your shots with it. The menu system's really nice. You can take control of some actually quite complex camera settings with this thing without too much trouble.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anyone who uses this camera or has used any other Sony cameras before, the menu system is going to feel very familiar. It's very easy to work with and navigate around, and like you said, you can easily compose your shots. So, video recording capabilities, the RX0 can record up to 1080p, so full HD, up to 60 frames a second. But since we're in the UK, essentially that's going to be 50 frames a second when you're using the PAL standard.
Yep.
Both at 50 megabits in Sony's XAVC codec.
And what about 4K? I know a lot of cameras have 4K now.
Interestingly, there's no 4K recording internally on the RX0. It does have the ability of outputting a clean 4K UHD signal through its HDMI output though. So if you hook up an external recorder, such as the Atmos Inferno, you've got a compact camera that you can fit in tight spaces that you can then easily record 10-bit 422 4K footage. You couple that with its ability to timecode sync and the fact that it's got Sony's flat S-Log2 profile, and you've got a compact multi-camera setup that's ideal for broadcast.
And how stable does that footage look?
Well, one thing to note about the RX0 is that it doesn't have any built-in optical stabilization, unlike some of its rivals. And this does show dramatically when pushing it, like for example strapping it to one of these off-road buggies and riding off-road. It is moving around a lot. But just to show you what it's like in a non-normal bumpy environment, here's me driving around in my rather flashy Citroen C4. I don't know what that bin bag is at the back.
Are you singing there or talking to yourself?
Probably singing.
Busy traffic all the time in London.
Okay, so obviously when we were racing around, we were doing it in the day, so it wasn't really dark, so we can't show off the low light capabilities of this camera. So I nipped outside in front of my flat and got some test shots, pushing up the ISO just so we can see what sort of noise comes in. So if we look at the first shot, this is at ISO 800. Of course, we're at a fixed lens at f4, so that can't change.
Yep.
So this is the only real way you can change your exposure without affecting your shutter speed in terms of video. So we've now bumped up to 1,600.
Still not bad.
So now we're at 3,200.
It's not bad. It's looking a bit more pedestrian now. That image quality has been lost a little bit, but it's usable, isn't it? It's certainly usable.
Yeah, it's definitely usable. And then finally, we've got ISO 6,400.
And I think again, actually, if you were pushed to use it, this isn't that bad.
Okay, so we talked a bit about video. What about its photography side of things?
Yes, so when you're shooting stills, its maximum burst mode is 16 frames per second, so it's pretty quick. And it's got an anti-distortion shutter as well, which can capture images at up to 1/32,000th of a second.
And that can shoot RAW and JPEG
It
simultaneously.
can shoot RAW and it can shoot JPEG, yeah.
That's the burst mode. What about just normal standalone pictures? How did it compare?
Yeah, the image quality is, it's not half bad. There's actually quite a lot of detail in those files. I've used some kind of action cams and, they look fine for video, but when you kind of get a full resolution image and you blow it up to, 100% on your screen,
yeah,
they start getting really soft really quick. For a few snaps when needed, there's a lot of detail there. It's actually quite nice image quality. I was quite impressed. So I think we've only really got one main thing to talk about now, and Kriss, it's probably one of my favourite features, but I'm going to let you explain it.
Yeah, and that's the super slow motion capabilities. So when it comes to super slow motion, there are two different priority modes on this camera. Quality priority, that gives you a maximum of 2 seconds of record time, favouring a higher resolution capture. And then there's the shoot time priority, that lets you record slightly longer, at 4 seconds, but at the cost of resolution. Now, even though each of these resolutions are slightly less than Full HD, when we looked at the files that came off the RX0, it seems that they all came out 1080p, so it's clear that RX0 is upscaling these in camera. So let's have a look at the footage. The first one is 250 frames per second, which is 10 times slow motion on a 25p timeline.
That's pretty sharp, and you can already see kind of every droplet of mud there. That's quite cool.
I think it looks really detailed and clear. And then we took it up a notch. We're now at 500 frames a second.
That quality is still really nice, actually. I'm quite impressed.
Yeah, it's just about holding up there. You can obviously see that it's degrading slightly with the...
It's a bit softer.
It's a bit softer, yeah. The final one, which is right up to its maximum, 1,000 frames per second.
You've lost a lot of quality here, haven't you? But I mean, I suppose that's offset by this crazy slow motion you've got.
Yeah, this is ridiculously slow.
You're only going to use this for like real, split-second moments, aren't you? Like real particular moments.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's interesting as well because notice that there's a cropping as well. So clearly when we're getting up to this sort of level, we're having to crop into the sensor. We're not using that full sensor. But I mean, for its effect, it's pretty nice to have that on hand if you do need it.
Yeah, you're not going to watch a whole movie like that, are you? But it's fine for a split second.
You'd probably spend the whole of your life watching it. I want to start the trilogy of Lord of the Rings in this frame rate.
It's waiting for Godot. Nothing would ever happen.
So, I mean, slow motion effect is very cool, but where I think it would look even better is if you had a few of these RX0 cameras and you're doing something awesome like a bullet time effect.
You're talking the Matrix here.
I am indeed talking the Matrix. Everybody likes that effect, right?
I love the Matrix.
But of course, you need to then be able to control and monitor multiple cameras, but there is a solution in doing that.
There is a solution, and that's because Sony have the Play Memories app, which allows you to connect up to 5 cameras and to individually control all of their settings.
But what if you have more than 5 cameras? I mean, a bullet time effect with 5 cameras is going to be over pretty quickly, I'd imagine.
That's true. What is going to happen then?
Well, Sony are working on a solution at the moment that we can't possibly comment any more than what we've just said now, that will allow you to control more than 5 cameras at a time. So we've just finished riding around for the day in these buggies here at Mudmania.
It's a tough life, isn't it?
It's a tough life. It's a very hard Tuesday, isn't it? I know. But first thing you'll notice as we wrap up is that I'm still in these overalls. Why is that, Matt?
Well, someone had to pull the
Where are
short
yours?
straw and be our driver for all the slow motion footage that we got. So Kriss very kindly went through the puddles 20, 30, 40 times.
I lost count. I mean, you know when you stay in the bath too long and you turn into that horrible
I've
prune?
seen your fingers.
You should see what is under this. Well, it's not great. It's the best of times, is it?
It's damp. It's damp. That's what it is.
Anyway, how did you find the camera?
No, I thought it was really impressive, and that slow motion footage that we just mentioned, I think that's one of the areas that I was kind of most impressed with. 1,000 frames per second, watching moments of real life back at that time, you just see things that you could never comprehend with the human eye. It's bullet time, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, especially in a body this small as well,
Yeah.
all done internally, it's pretty impressive stuff.
And you've got that 1-inch sensor in there as well.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
that's ridiculous.
And I mean, for more like the professional side of things, broadcast, that 1-inch sensor and the ability to do decent quality HD internally and still output the 4K clean and uncompressed,
Yep.
it's going to really appeal to those sort of filmmakers.
Yeah, and when you're shooting stills, you're going to get more dynamic range, you're going to get better noise performance, so shooting in low light's going to be more of an option than with some of those other action cameras. photos. I think, you know, it's a very different device to some of those more affordable action cameras, isn't it? You know, there's nothing stopping you from taking this on a family holiday, but let's face it, this probably isn't the device for that.
Yeah. It's not a direct competitor to GoPro, is it? It's sort of a different breed.
Yeah.
But you can still take it on holidays and still take it off-road
Still have some fun like today with it. Anyway, for more information about the Sony RX0, visit wex.co.uk.